Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Career Cloud Radio. I'm your host, Michael Gardon. Rebekah Bastian is a creator. She's created Startup, a tech movement, a book, multiple written, visual, and aerial art pieces, and 2 humans. She's the CEO and co-founder of OwnTrail, a community of thousands of creatives, entrepreneurs, and executives where they help each other navigate and celebrate their authentic journeys. OwnTrail members are gaining a new perspective on their life's work by visually mapping out their journey, reflecting on milestones, and naming their aspirations. Prior to OwnTrail, Rebekah was Vice President of Product and Vice President of Community and Culture at Zillow. She's also the author of the award-winning book, Blaze Your Own Trail, which served as the foundation for the idea behind OwnTrail. In this episode, we talk about her windy, non-strategic career path, how she found her career footing in the fast-paced startup Zillow, and when she knew it was time to quit to build OwnTrail full-time. You do not want to miss this amazing story. Finally, for anyone interested in joining OwnTrail, as I am, go to owntrail.com, OwnTrail.com, and use the code COMMUNITY. Thanks for listening. Rebekah, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So I'm really excited. I was talking to you a little bit before we hit record here about how I love stories. And I know, I've seen the Business Insider headline about your own story in terms of leaving your corporate job with Zillow. Everybody knows that business, high growth business. And so I want to get to that. But I'd love you to start off your story a little bit before that. And if you could give our audience kind of the maybe career trajectory that you've been on, maybe post college. I'd just like to give them a window into sort of where your career was leading up to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always like to caveat it with I can tell you my career trajectory and it's all true. And it also doesn't capture so much of the other parts of my experience. So we'll dig into that too. But yeah, so my first job after I graduated a couple degrees in mechanical engineering and then proceeded to not use those directly. So my first job out of grad school was at Microsoft as a program manager, working on Microsoft Office Outlook. And I did that for almost 3 years and left because I hated the commute, actually, even though in hindsight, I also didn't love the job that much. But answered a Craigslist ad and was one of the first employees at Zillow when it was still a very stealth startup. And I barely knew what I was getting into at all, but joined as a pretty entry-level program manager, which is similar to product manager and kind of Seattle speak there, and grew through my career there. So I was at Zillow for almost 15 years. In the early days, I kind of kept raising my hand for different things and taking on new initiatives and, growing in that way. And then I moved into people management and then kind of grew to vice president of product there over time. And then my last couple of years at Zillow, I actually made a pretty big pivot where I followed my passions and a lot of the side projects I've been doing for years and created this new org called Community and Culture, which was really thinking about creating more equitable systems, both internally in the company, but also externally through our business decisions and products. So I was then vice president of that until I left to start OwnTrail, which I'd written a book called Blaze Your Own Trail. And that led to, so the book is this kind of choose your own adventure exploration of life paths. And what started as me thinking it'd be a really cool book launch website turned into an entire business. And I ended up leaving to do that. And so I've been growing OwnTrail for the past 2.5 years.
Excellent. So I have a few follow-up questions. You mentioned mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
Take me back to the mindset there when you were going after that degree. How did you think your career was maybe going to unfold at that point in time?
Well, so my college years were a whole journey in themselves where I failed out the first time and had gone for music and then ended up going to community college and then discovering that I really loved math and science kind of stuff. And so when I made the decision to then go into mechanical engineering and transfer into, I transferred to University of Washington for undergrad for that. It was me saying, I really like this math and science stuff and I want to be an inventor, basically. What degree can I do for that? And it was actually an ex-boyfriend's brother. We were all drinking tequila one night and he said, I think that's what mechanical engineering is. And I was like, cheers, I will be a mechanical engineer. So that's how that So yes, the vision was kind of being an inventor. At the very end of undergrad, I mentioned to a professor that's what I wanted to do, this old curmudgeon guy. And he laughed at me and said, well, you did the wrong degree for that. And I was devastated for a couple of weeks. But like I'd applied to 2 grad schools. And I said, well, if I get in, I applied to Berkeley and Stanford. And I said, if I get into one of those, because they had really cool mechanical engineering programs, then I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll figure out something. So I spent a couple of weeks being devastated. I'd been already rejected by Stanford. I realized I couldn't be an inventor, according to this dude. And I was really bummed. But then I got into Berkeley and ended up working for a professor there, Alice Agagino, and she was amazing. And the whole program there was all around new product development. And so, which basically is being an inventor. So I had a renewed sense of optimism from that. And interestingly, while I didn't end up doing mechanical engineering, the whole new product development cycle, which is the inventive part, is what I've been doing ever since then. I've just been, I just happened to take a leap into software instead, which was also kind of accidental. I really wanted to get back to Seattle to be with my boyfriend, that one's my husband now. So that one was a good call. But I just took a random interview with Microsoft because they were on campus. And I thought I was showing up for what would be like a hardware interview, which would make sense based on the degree they'd done. And the guy there was like, I don't know how to give a hardware interview. Here, I'll give you a program manager interview. And I ended up getting that job, even though I'd never heard of what that was before. So a lot of serendipity and non-career based or non-strategic decisions that led to some seemingly very strategic moves.
Yeah, and we can all identify with the non-strategy type of path. I'm the same way. The other question that I had that stuck out to me about that story that you were telling was, I got to ask, what was it about the Craigslist ad that caught your attention for Zillow? Because that's, going from Microsoft established company to startup.
Yeah. Again, not strategic. I went looking because the commute from where I live to Microsoft was just brutal. And although fun fact, my friends that I commuted with, Carolyn, ended up being the founding engineer of OwnTrail. So things happen in a magical way there. But I never loved it there. And people's experiences at Microsoft vary so much based on the department and what's going on at the time and everything. But it was a little bit boring. It was a very legacy product, and I was making very iterative changes on it. And but in my head, I'm like, okay, so this is what a real job is like. Like I didn't know, and so I didn't leave because I was bored or because I thought I could do something much more exciting, which is what ended up happening. But I left because of the commute, and then I answered the Craigslist job because it was downtown Seattle, which was a much better commute. And honestly, like by the time I got through the interview process and got to the job offer, I knew that they were doing something in real estate. I knew that the founders had an amazing track record. They'd started Expedia. And I didn't know much else. It was very stealth at the time and they weren't letting people know a lot. But I was like, it's a good commute. Seems like everyone I met was awesome. And I'm like, well, worst case scenario, I'll get another job. So I just went for it. But I think I was actually the first employee that answered a Craigslist ad that didn't already know somebody there. So it was very, very early.
Interesting. Very interesting. And so you kind of have outlined your non-strategy decisions that have, kind of wound you up at Zillow. It seems like from your story that you really kind of came into your own at Zillow in terms of starting to track and progress. Is there anything there that kind of clicked for you? Because a lot of people, it's really about, for me especially, thinking about education and frankly career. It's about sort of the right spot to be in and how you learn and just the right fit in general. So I'm just curious as what about that may have kind of aided you along the way from answering a Craigslist ad to, VP.
Yeah. I mean, definitely the people. I worked with incredible people there. And I think that really, like, people leave jobs mostly because of their managers or because of the people they're working with, right? So, like, these are people that brought out the best in me. But also, like, I'm a very learn by doing kind of a person. And an early stage startup is an amazing place to learn by doing, And because it was also new and we were doing some exciting stuff, we were really like throwing open the curtains on a very opaque industry, real estate. And so it was just incredibly exciting. I was able to everything that was interesting to me, I could just be like, oh, I'd like to help with that. And everyone's like, great, because there's always more to do than you can do in an early stage company. And so I was able to, like I started our first mobile apps there as a side project. Like the iPhone had just come out, and I just started like on the side playing around with some developers there that were also interested, and we built our first iPhone app. And it took a really long time because there weren't any APIs or anything to plug into at that point. But then that ended up like propelling, flash forward, and like 2/3 of the business is on mobile. So it was like this huge strategic move that I ended up being able to be the first product leader on. And but things like that, where you could just kind of be like, this is really interesting to me, or this needs to be done. And that's definitely how, like, the ownership that you feel over that kind of environment, like what you're building. Like I very much felt like some of my friends were like, did you join a cult? I was just like so excited about what we were building. But like, that's definitely the kind of energy. And honestly, like, and I had such an amazing experience. Like I wouldn't have left when I left if it weren't for wanting to build OwnTrail. But jumping back into the early stage startup now, I'm like, oh yeah, this is my sweet spot. Like I really love this kind of 0 to 1 phase that happens in the beginning.
Yeah, I tell a lot of people, like, if you're a generalist, right, and you demonstrated the aptitude to just get things done and learn really fast, early stage startups are like just the absolute breeding ground for you to find your rhythm and to find what you do. Interestingly, as a side note, I was the 5th employee at a startup in Seattle. Actually, I'm in Madison, Wisconsin. It's where I live, and I was commuting out there. This is like 2012 to 16 time period. So reviews.com, we built internet advertising kind of conglomerate from out there. And it was the same thing. It was, I kind of know internet content. I'm a hustler. I can figure out business ops and all that kind of stuff. And, kind of the rest is history. So I love that part about your story. So at what point in time then did the book come about? Because you wrote the book at Zillow that ended up kind of becoming the OwnTrail.
Yeah. Well, like I'll kind of segue into that answer with the kind of interesting fact that I didn't even know I liked writing until a couple of years before I wrote the book. So I had I'd had to write specs and stuff for work, but I'd never tried writing. And I got asked by like a local Seattle tech women kind of organization to write a guest blog post for them. And I did. And that was super well received. People seemed to love it. So I kind of shot my shot and emailed the blog post to Arianna Huffington, whose email address I found on Google. So it was a very cold email. And then she was like, this is great. And she gave me a byline on Huffington Post, which is amazing that like that. Very lucky. There's a lot of shots that I have taken that did not result in something like that. But so then I just started writing prolifically. I'm like, I love writing. And I started, now that I had this outlet to be writing on, and I started doing instead of writing. So that was kind of like, that's what seeded that. As I kept writing, I'm like, I really enjoy this. And I was like, it'd be really cool to write a book sometime. But like, I don't feel like I'm a fiction writer. I like writing about like ideas in my head and stuff. And I don't feel like I'm enough of an expert on anything to write a how-to book on something or whatever. And so that was just kind of sitting in my mind there. So the book, Blaze Your Own Trail, literally came to me in the middle of the night. Like I woke up and I'm like, I have an idea. And that is not unusual for me that those things happen to me quite a bit. That's when my big ideas happen. But I woke up, I'm like, I'd read the Choose Your Own Adventure books as a kid and I loved those. And I woke up, I'm like, what if there's a Choose Your Own Adventure book that explored life paths, and this one is specific to like women's life paths and the different decisions and choices and all the things that don't go as planned, or all of the hard things that we make it through. And so there's like all these different paths. There's 19 different endings, and each one is called Happily Ever After something or other, but it's kind of tongue-in-cheek happily ever after. None of them are the ideal scenarios, but it shows that you can kind of make it through all these things. And I weave a lot of data into the book to kind of create a sense of solidarity of, you're not alone in all of these like unplanned or difficult circumstances that you're going to encounter through life. And it really came from this idea, like, I'd for years at that point been just, taking random coffee conversations with people that would ask me. And there's this very common thread amongst these conversations, which was tend to be people earlier in their career who would reach out and be like, they felt like they were supposed to know where they were going exactly, how they were going to get there. They felt like they didn't want to get it wrong, and you look around and you see people's like seemingly linear paths, like LinkedIn or social media, and you feel like you're getting it wrong when yours isn't like that. In reality, no one's is, but it didn't get shown in that way. And so like the thing I really wanted to shout from the rooftops was there is no one right path. So you can't get it wrong, and that's what led to the book. And so I kind of had the idea and just started running with it and just working on it on the side in the evenings. And yeah, so I did that at Zillow. And, I told my colleagues and stuff I was working on it, and they were all super supportive. And then I signed with a publisher after when it was almost done and kind of wrapped that up. So that was really exciting and really fun. Like I really enjoyed the process of it.
Yeah. And it seemed to really, I assume going through that book process and then continuing to work at Zillow, the whole thing was still on your mind in terms of what else could this idea be?
No, I really wasn't even thinking that way, honestly.
Okay. It was the book.
Literally. It was the book. It was just the book. I wasn't like, I didn't think it was going to lead to anything else. And then I my publisher, Barrett Kohler, and they're awesome, but they did this kind of like conference where they brought all their authors together and like were teaching us things about like, book marketing and how you're promoting your book and stuff like that. And I started like, my wheels started turning. I'm like, ooh, I could make a really cool website here where like, there's all these different paths in the book, but obviously it's a finite number. And I'm like, it'd be cool if like the website, people that read the book could then share what their path was, it's kind of like a viral marketing thing or whatever. And so that's where it started. But then as I started working on that, then I started having this feeling, I'm like, I think there's something bigger there. And like, I don't know if you know this feeling or if this description resonates with you, but like you have all these ideas in your head and you're like, they feel like they're about to come together. Like it feels like you need to sneeze kind of. You're like, oh, there's something there. What is it? And so I sneezed. It all came together and I had an aha moment. I'm like, the power of seeing what people's real journeys are like as a means to really embracing your own. And like, not just as a, like at that point, by the time I put it together, I'm like, and the book did that in this one way, but this thing could be really powerful because like everyone's wondering, like all these like coffee meetings and stuff are always like, tell me about your journey. How did you get here? I'm like, well, I can tell you that. I end up repeating myself a lot of different conversations, but also like that's one journey. And there's so many different ways to get there, especially because, I came up through product management. And that's one that's very specifically like, everyone's like, oh, how do I become a product manager? What path do you take? And I'm like, oh, every product manager I know has had a very different path. Like that's a kind of nebulous career that comes from a lot of different places. So that was part of like, what led to thinking about it this way. But in reality, when you look at the trails on OwnTrail, every different point that you could look at in terms of where someone is in their life with their career or other parts of their life, always there's so many different paths that can lead to that. And that's really empowering to see because it really makes you realize that you're not getting it wrong. Your windy path is just the way it should be. And that there's so many different ways you can get to your aspirations. And it really opens up the world of, thinking about where you could go.
Before I start kind of asking some questions about OwnTrail itself, because we're teasing it a whole bunch there. But I gotta know, I ask, everybody that I have on has some type of change. We've detailed kind of your backstory. So you've got this idea and you're working at a corporate job. And from the outside, it seems like you've got it made because you're making a good amount of money. You're a VP, you've got a book, you're out there. Was there a specific moment in time, other than the aha and the sneeze that you said, was there a specific moment in time where you said, like, I need a change or I'm going to make this change? Or like, what was sort of behind finally leaping out and doing something else, kind of leaving the comfort of the big career and moving out into the unknown?
Yeah. I mean, this one was very much running towards something instead of away from something. So, which is it's such a privilege to have that, oftentimes you're in a circumstance where you have to kind of run away from that to take care of yourself but in this case, like, I think, honestly, when I made the pivot from product to community and culture, that was a little bit more of a, like, I needed change, which I loved the job I was doing then. And I knew I wanted to stay at Zillow. Like, I was still really happy with the company, but I was like, if my team was running really smoothly, things were like, I knew how to do all the things I was doing for the most part. And I just felt like I the things I was most passionate about were the stuff I was doing on the side. So with that one, I'm like, I really want to make a change into those things, which I guess is running towards something as well. But I'm like, I don't feel like I'm growing as much here anymore. And I feel like I could be growing a lot and making a really big impact in this new space. So that was that decision. But then that was only a couple of years from when I made that decision till when I left. So I was still learning a ton. I had built like the best team ever. I was really happy. So it was actually a very bittersweet decision because I was having to say goodbye to something that I wanted to keep doing and a team I wanted to keep working with. But for me, it was like, so I was working on OwnTrail on the side for about 6 months before I gave my notice. And then another 4 months after I gave my notice, because I did like a very slow off ramp, and the company was super supportive of everything. But I guess after about 6 months of working on it, and I'd formed a small team with OwnTrail, which were also incredible people. I met my co-founder, Katie, and we were building it. We were planning to launch in February of 2020, along with my book. We did do that. And so I just got to the point where I'm like, there's really a there. Like, this is something really big. And I kind of felt like everything I had done and everything I'd learned led up to this point, and that I just really needed to do it. And I just like the aha moment there was really like, if I keep doing this indefinitely on the side, it has a much less likelihood of taking off than if I go all in, and I need to see this through. It was just, it really was like, I can't not do this kind of feeling. So yeah, then I gave my notice, which was like, kind of a heartbreaking moment. Although the funny thing was, because I'd been being very transparent with my team and everybody about like, I'm working on this project on the side that stemmed from my book. I'd done all the things I supposed to do. Like I bought a separate laptop for myself for the first time in like 15 years, and was doing all the OwnTrail stuff on there. And I wrote a letter to our legal department to let them know what I was working on. I wanted to make sure I was super above the board with everything. So by the time I did give my notice, my manager was like, "Oh yeah, I saw that coming." And he was awesome about it. But I think he might have realized that was coming before I even did. So yeah, but it was very much like I need to do this kind of a thing.
Excellent. I love that. I mean, there's so many different paths to change, right? Sometimes it's forced. Sometimes you're running from something. Sometimes you're running towards something. And it seems like you were very much, as you said, running towards something, and we were being pulled by, kind of a higher purpose in terms of continuing to see out the vision that you set forth in the book, which is fantastic. So now you have OwnTrail, which is a company and a site. Talk to us about, what like we've talked a little bit about it, but what problem are you really trying to solve here? Who is this for? And just give us a deep dive into it. Because I from the outside of what I've looked at, I love it. What I try to do here on this podcast is destigmatize the nonlinear path, right? I'm a product of a whole bunch of career change. And so I love that, what you're bringing to the table there. So in your words, talk to our audience directly about what you guys are doing.
Yeah. And side note, you should totally create your trail, Mike, and you can share it.
I'm going to,
my
for
trail.
sure.
Okay.
I love it.
Can't wait to see it. Yeah. So, and it's evolved a little bit. Like the big vision for OwnTrail has stayed pretty consistent, which is like creating a world where everybody is able to own their story and make progress along their journey in a way that's true to them. So not being confined by the boxes that the world has told you to fit cleanly into, but really taking up space on your own terms and, achieving your big dreams. So we started with being centered on women, and we started with really thinking about the power of and enabling the power of seeing other people's real journeys and embracing and reflecting on your own journey. And that resonated with people big time. And so from there, what we then heard from our community, because we're a very community built kind of platform, was this is amazing. Now, what do I do with it? And that's really what we've moved into. So over time, we've expanded to all genders. A lot of reasons for that, which has been really positive. And we've really embraced the tools and the help from the community to achieve your next milestone. So it's about owning your journey and seeing other people's real journeys. That's the trail is the foundation of OwnTrail. But then it's about, how do you make progress? How do you get help? How do you call in the help you need? And how do you stay accountable to? And how do you make progress along your path so that you're achieving the next milestones that are really important to you? So a lot of that is reflecting on, is this really where I want to be going? Because oftentimes we're told just climb next step in this ladder, or like, these are the check boxes you're supposed to check off in your life. So it's, there's a lot of unpacking to be done there in terms of like, okay, where are my passions really? Where do I really want to be going? What's the purpose that I really want to be working towards across my personal and professional life? And then how am I going to get there? And so, yeah, we think of it now almost as an operating system for your life where you're, sharing really authentically what your trail is and working towards that.
Very cool. I love the idea of essentially showing people other data points, right? Like if you
Yeah.
think, if I think about how venture capital works, or how investments work, it's like it's really hard to judge the merits of a single investment in a vacuum when you have nothing to compare it to. And I think the same is very true with your career. It's like you kind of, I feel, because I've been here, I feel like, man, I'm all alone on this island, and I'm looking outside at only a fraction of the things that other people are going through or whatever, and I'm trying to make this comparison, but it's not apples to apples. And so when you see other people's data points and the messy paths that they've gone to get where they are, you start to feel a little bit more confident that, okay, I'm not the only one that doesn't have this figured out. In fact, I do, or we're all trying to figure it out, and we're all on this path. So I love that part. I think comparison in and of itself is hugely valuable for people that pull back the curtain. And then this idea of reflection along the way is equally powerful, and being able to systematize that, because people kind of do that one-off, right? And it's often at like some unhappiness inflection point is when we start to like reflect. But if you can kind of do that along the way and ask that question that you said, like, is this really where I want to go? And have support from other people, like it's cutting down the cycle time for you to, find the next move and make progress quicker. So that's how I see it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And yeah, it's, I think there's a lot of people who are feeling kind of stuck, kind of unfulfilled, but they don't have that breaking point yet to make the change. And I think that it's not an ideal situation to wait till you hit the breaking point, right? It's like I think that any time is a good time. And I think, you see things around like quiet quitting or the great resignation or all these kind of things that are happening, as our world has been really shaken up over the past 2 years. And I think like, that's definitely the silver lining of the stuff that we've been kind of collectively going through, is that like, sometimes it's good to have a forcing function that makes you really reevaluate where you're going in life, because like, you don't want to just be on that hamster wheel forever if it's not serving you. And so like, whatever it takes to realize like, oh, this isn't, I've been following the steps I thought I was supposed to take and it's not feeling right. Like, let's kind of step back and look more holistically at, where I am and where I really want to be going, and see how other people have made some of those transitions as well, or get help from people that have been there. It can be really powerful and like a proactive way of making sure that you're really living the life that you want to be.
Yeah, that's super powerful. I think about the nonlinear career path and trying to define what quote unquote progress looks like, because oftentimes it's very difficult. How do you think about helping people, I guess, continue to make progress despite maybe having, a singular path that they can like kind of plan against?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. Like, one is that I think we have this kind of definition of progress that is very like hustle centric, which is like, in order to make progress, you always have to be doing, doing, doing. And sometimes that can actually lead to lack of progress if you're doing, doing, doing in the wrong direction, or if you're burning yourself out to the point where you can't do anymore, or like, right? So I think oftentimes, like, I think progress needs to be thought of a little bit more holistically, where it also includes the times where you're just pausing and reflecting and understanding yourself better, or overcoming inner blocks that you might have, like that's progress as well. So like zooming out and looking at more that way. But then also, like, I think it's important to have kind of regular points along your path, especially when you're doing something that's a little bit more on autopilot, to step back and look at like, directionally, am I headed in the right place? Because there's no one right path. So there's a lot of different paths you could take, but you can kind of look directionally at where you might want to be pointing your energy, based on, I kind of like this rubric, if you will, of taking inventory of like, what are you passionate about, right now, which can change over time, of course. You like, what are the things that really give you energy when you do them? And then what are you good at? And of course, that's a combination, not just of the things that are on your resume or the degrees you hold or whatever, but like, what are those inherent skills? Like, are you good at like analytical thinking or creative problem solving or bringing people together or like, all those things that, like you said, you can kind of apply to so many different paths, right? So, your passions, your skills, and then the third piece is where are you needed? And that can certainly change over time. And where you're needed can sometimes be as simple as like, there's a job posting that you answer because they say we need this, someone to fill this job, and you say, I can do that, right? But also sometimes where you're needed might not be as clearly defined yet. And it's more like recognizing a problem to be solved and you having an idea for how to solve it, right? So I think along the way, as you're taking time to pause and reflect and really, getting to know yourself more, it's important to kind of keep looking directionally at that intersection of passion, skills, and opportunity and thinking where you might be, focusing your attention going forward.
You're speaking my language. I love it. The energy piece, like one of the things I've had to do over my career is get out of my analytical head and start to feel more, where am I pulled? What gives me energy versus takes my energy, and make decisions that way. I think when we're young, we think we have to take every opportunity. We have the thing that like opportunity is sort of scarce. And I think over time, as you mature in your career, you realize like there's way more things that you could do. And the skill is in figuring out, what not to do. And that comes through knowing yourself, knowing your circle of competence, and knowing, what gives you energy, and being true to your interests and not, some external measure of money, status, whatever it might be. So it's really interesting.
And that can change over time, of course, too, right? Like,
right.
I've
Absolutely.
been through times in my life where it felt really good to be saying yes to everything because I had the energy and bandwidth and I was really excited by all these things. And then, yeah, you're right. You get to different points where you're like, okay, I need to start saying no to some of the things. And then you become more intentional about that. But I think like that certainly evolves over time.
So another thing that kind of goes into the equation, which is sort of interesting, I guess, and maybe in the last year or two, is this idea of like, your relationship to work as well, and putting work in perspective with the rest of your life. The term, we have terms coming out here, right? Like the Great Resignation, and we have quiet quitting, and all of this kind of stuff. Sort of these forces working to, I guess, put work in perspective. How do you sort of help people evaluate, your relationship with work and put that in the right perspective?
I mean, that's also something that will change over time and based on circumstance and based on you, so there's not a right answer there. But like for me, I when I was an early employee at Zillow, it was very intense. It was like kind of the classic early startup thing where I was working really hard. Sometimes I'd like be overnight there, like working around the clock. It was super intense and it was so exciting. I loved it. Like that was what I wanted to be doing at that point in my life, and I didn't have kids yet. And I I had the bandwidth to be doing that. And it was cool. I'm so glad I had that experience. The thing that got stuck in my head though, was that is how early stage startups have to be. And so actually for quite a while, and I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial things at Zillow, starting new things. I started advising startups, I was very into kind of like the entrepreneur thing. And, but in my head, I had this kind of, in retrospect, silly idea that, oh, I don't think I could go start a company because I don't have the kind of life right now where I want to be working around the clock on that. And then the obvious realization there is like, oh, if I'm the one starting the company, then I can set the culture and it doesn't have to be that way, So it took a little bit of kind of breaking out of that pattern of thinking for me. But now, I very much love the idea of work-life integration, where because I am all in on OwnTrail. And to be honest, I think about it almost all the time. I'm very passionate about what we're building. But, I have 2 kids. I have some strong communities that I'm part of, my husband, I love creative outlets that I'm really passionate about. I find ways to integrate all of those. And, even at OwnTrail, amazing team, like probably the most talented team I've ever worked with. And I think we're doing the best work of our careers, and we're doing a 4-day work week. We've been piloting that. I think it's going to stick because it's been like, we've really focused on like, take care of your mental health. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Do your best work within the confines of knowing there's always going to be more to do. So like, no hustle culture, don't burn yourself out, take care of yourself, and then you'll be able to keep doing your best work. And it's really like, we're getting a lot done. We have a small, scrappy team. We're probably arguably underfunded. Like, we've raised 1.2 million so far, but that's a lot less than, than if you look at kind of some of the biases in venture capital. But we're getting a lot of really incredible work done by preserving our, our balance and our health. And so it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that as a leader, you can certainly define what kind of work culture there is, but also, everyone can define that for themselves. You can say, and that's the people that are quiet quitting or that are leaving their jobs or saying like, this is what I need for my work life integration or balance or whatever. And that is not matching up to where I am right now or the kind of work I'm being asked to do right now. And I'm going to own that decision. And that's something you can do because there's a whole different range of company cultures out there that you can, be selective about or start your own thing or, the freelance economy is booming right now. There's so many options there for really understanding what you need at this point in your life around the role that work plays in your life, and then making that decision to ensure that you're getting what you need there.
I'm curious if you have any, I guess, advice for people who maybe in a corporate career who are feeling that pain and feeling like they need a change in their relationship with work, like, but are struggling with how to vocalize that inside an established culture. You definitely touched on some things, right? Like, okay, there are options. Like, people, you can take some ownership, and you could quit loudly, right? And realize that there are some options there, right? Freelancing and other things. But is there anything that comes to mind in terms of standing up for yourself or trying to influence culture from within when you have something that's just not working for you?
I mean, I think it's really, certainly if you're in a leadership position, then you can kind of, you have a little bit more power to kind of like lead by example there. Like for me, I got promoted into people management when I was like 8 months pregnant with my first kid. And so I came back from maternity leave, and I was very much like, so I'm leaving at 5 every day, you guys, to go get my kid from daycare. And that's what's happening. And I'm not going to be online during the evenings when I'm, getting him to ready for bed or whatever, And that was fine because I was like, I became incredibly efficient as a mother. And I said, well, do that. But I think it also, like, as my team grew and as I grew into an executive role, I ended up having the most diversity in my team in terms of, within the product org, I think because I was really setting that kind of culture and leading by example there. And so that's something you can do. But like personally, I think, even if I hadn't been in a leadership role at that time, I still would have been showing up and saying, hey, I'm leaving at 5 every day, and this is how it's going to work. And Zillow would have been supportive of that. Just, I happen to know that. But like, maybe you say that and your company's not supportive of it. And they're like, sorry, we need FaceTime. We need you to, to appear like you're always hustling. And then if that's the case, then you do kind of loudly quit, I think. I don't know. Like, I appreciate a lot of the sentiment behind the quiet quitting movement in terms of like drawing boundaries. But I also feel like it's a little bit of a, like some of what it's evolved into is a little bit of checking out, like not caring as much. And I've always been someone that cares a lot and is really excited about what I'm doing. I just need to draw boundaries around when I'm doing it to make sure that I'm taking care of the other aspects of my life. So I think it's draw those boundaries and see the reaction. And if it's not a reaction that is going to work for what you need in life, then that's where you make a change, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty staunchly against the quiet quitting movement. My bias is you got to do it loudly and transparently. You don't necessarily have to just quit, right? But like what you were talking about, vocalize what you think you need, and be transparent about it and put it in place. And if you get pushback, your best option is to always have options. So if your network is really strong and you've got a couple other places where you could go work, and you go tell that to your boss who's pushing back on you for some, pretty, mundane or trivial request that you have. Hey, I can go here, right? Like that is the great equalizer when you have a strong network and you have options of other things that you can do. You have a parachute, right? You can pull the ripcord easily. And so that's kind of like my message, I think, around that is, what do you think you need for the long term? Vocalize it and have options if you get the no.
Yeah. And I think positioning is important here, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like drawing boundaries isn't just for yourself, right? Like I think the message here, which is very true, is that like I want to draw these boundaries because I want to be able to do my best work here. And I know that I can't do that if I'm feeling overextended or burnt out, or I'm like sacrificing my mental or physical health for this job. And I want to be able to stay in this job and grow in this job and help this company for a really long time. And the only way that I'm going to be able to do my best work and stay here a long time is if I draw these boundaries. And so like it kind of repositions it as like, it's not a selfish act. I mean, it is in a good way, but also like it's for the best of the company that they figure out how to support employees in this way so that they have that longevity and people that are really growing and becoming experts, because it's very costly to have high turnover. So, I think really thinking about how to frame it as a win-win is helpful there as well.
Yeah, influencing the culture up and from within. Life's a marathon; it's not a sprint. So we all need to make some of these changes. Love it. Love your perspective. Love what you're doing with OwnTrail. Do you have a parting message or anything else maybe that we haven't touched on that you want to leave our audience with?
Join OwnTrail, definitely. Like that's the best
For
way
sure.
with me. Create your trail on OwnTrail. For your listeners, if they want to use the code community, then you're welcome to use that to get 25% off of your first year of OwnTrail membership. Anyone can create their trail for free and see some of what's on there, but to get the full utility around really making progress to your next milestone, that's $10 a month membership. So you can use that code to get a discount. Yeah, definitely, Mike. I'd love for you to share both your when you have it and my trails in the show notes so people can connect with us and learn more about our journeys. And I'll see you over there on OwnTrail.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to become a full member here and check out all of the ins and outs and features so I can follow your journey much more. I'm going to create my trail and we'll definitely share those out to the audience. Anything else you want to say in terms of where people can find you? OwnTrail obviously is, but any other socials or places where people can find you and follow you?
Yeah, Rebekah Bastian and OwnTrail are on like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So we're pretty findable on those places. And then, but yeah, OwnTrail is definitely the best place to get in touch and message me. And one of the big features on OwnTrail is asking for help and having the community help you. So I'm there to give help to anyone that's navigating their journey and wants to join.
Excellent. We'll have links to all of that stuff in the show notes when we get the episode together and sent out, and we will make sure we have the code community in there as well for all of us. Rebekah, thank you so much for being here. It's been a phenomenal conversation, and I really, really look forward to following your progress.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk with you.